What would you do if, in a moment of complete vulnerability, your dignity was struck in front of the world? A woman boarded a plane, holding nothing more than her ticket and her quiet strength. Yet in the space of a heartbeat, she was slapped across the face, not for what she had done, but for who she was. Imagine sitting in that seat. Imagine the silence of the cabin, the weight of every eye watching, and no one moving to stop it. In life, storms often come without warning. But when they do, we face a choice. Do we strike back? Do we shrink in shame? Or do we stand with the unshakable power of dignity? As you hear this story unfold, ask yourself if it had been you, your mother, your wife, your sister. How would you want the world to respond? Would you want silence or justice? This is more than a story about one slap. It's about all of us and the respect we owe each other. Stay with us. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel, because what comes next will change the way you see justice in the everyday. The hum of the terminal was familiar, a constant chorus of rolling suitcases, muffled announcements, and the occasional burst of laughter that cut through the monotone. Alicia Morgan adjusted the strap of her leather tote bag and glanced at the boarding pass clutched in her hand. Seat 2A, first class, New York to Los Angeles. It wasn't her first time stepping into a first-class cabin. Not anymore. Being married to Darius Morgan meant private jets on occasion, luxury lounges, a life her younger self could never have imagined. And yet each time, without fail, she felt the same set of eyes, the same pause, the same unspoken question hovering in the air. Does she really belong here? Her steps were calm, almost rhythmic, as she walked down the jet bridge. She wore a navy blue dress, simple and understated, paired with comfortable flats. Nothing screamed wealth. Nothing about her said trophy wife. She wasn't interested in proving herself through designer logos or a glittering necklace. Alicia carried herself with the kind of dignity that didn't need decoration. When she reached her seat, she slid into 2A with quiet grace. The leather was cool beneath her hand, the window framing the tarmac where ground crew scurried like ants in reflective vests. She exhaled slowly, allowing herself a moment to settle. A man across the aisle glanced at her, then looked again, a flicker of something in his eyes. It wasn't curiosity, it was doubt. Alicia noticed it, tucked the reaction away, and smiled faintly as if to herself. She was used to these silent verdicts. The cabin filled steadily, each new arrival brushing past her row with faint perfume trails, polished shoes, and the crisp rustle of tailored suits. Alicia kept her gaze soft, steady, resting on the world outside the window, but she wasn't lost in thought. She was remembering. She remembered the first time she sat in first class years ago. A newlywed with a borrowed dress. Her hair pulled into a tight bun because she didn't know what else to do with it. She remembered the flight attendant who had asked twice if she was sure she was in the right section. She remembered the old woman who had clutched her pearls when Alicia leaned down to stow her bag overhead. And she remembered the feeling that burned behind her ribs, shame she couldn't name. Now, years later, the shame was gone. What remained was resolve. A quiet, steady fire. A shadow stretched across her row. Alicia looked up. The woman was striking at first glance tall, statuesque, her hair styled into an immaculate blonde wave that framed her face like something sculpted. A white blazer draped over her shoulders. Diamond studs glittered at her ears, and her heels clicked with every deliberate step. Her presence was a performance, and everyone around seemed to notice. This was Madeline Cross. though Alicia didn't know the name yet. To Alicia, she was just another affluent passenger boarding first class. But to the rest of the cabin, she was recognizable, the wife of Senator Charles Cross, a man whose face appeared often on campaign posters and late-night talk shows. Madeline stopped at the row, her gaze falling on Alicia like a sudden chill. "That's my seat," Madeline said, her voice smooth but sharp enough to slice. Alicia blinked, then calmly held out her boarding pass. "Seat 2A, she replied, her tone even. Madeline tilted her head, studying the boarding pass as though it were counterfeit. Then her lips curled into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Interesting, because I've flown this route many times, and that's always my seat." The words weren't casual. They dripped with entitlement. Alicia kept her breathing steady. She'd had this kind of encounter before, though not always in first class. Sometimes at luxury boutiques, sometimes at hotels. Always the same script suspicion first, then dismissal, then the casual sting of condescension. "I'm sure there's no mistake," Alicia said softly. "It's right here." She gestured again to the pass, but Madeline didn't move. She looked Alicia up and down the simple dress. The natural curls, the lack of jewelry, and something in her expression hardened. Around them, the murmur of passengers faded into a tense silence. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to recede, leaving only the weight of the moment. From a few rows back, a young man, Tyler Brooks, 27, baseball cap tilted slightly back, watched with raised brows. He had his phone in his hand, thumb hovering near the record button. Something told him this exchange was about to escalate. Alicia felt the air shift. She could almost predict the words before they left Madeline's mouth. And yet, knowing didn't dull the sting. "You don't look like you belong here," Madeline said finally, her voice loud enough to carry. The cabin went still. Heads turned. Alicia's chest tightened, but her face remained calm. She folded her hands in her lap, the silver of her wedding band glinting faintly beneath the cabin light. She could feel the judgment pressing in, a weight that was both familiar and unbearable. But she wouldn't flinch. Not this time. Not ever again. The boarding process dragged on around them, the scene frozen in its awkward intensity. A flight attendant, Harper Lane, chief purser, approached with a practiced smile that faltered slightly when she took in the tension. "Is everything all right here?" Harper asked, in her tone polite but clipped. Madeline gestured toward Alicia, a perfect manicure flashing like a dagger. "This woman is in my seat. Seat 2A. Harper turned to Alicia, her eyes scanning the boarding pass. Alicia held it steady, her gaze unwavering. "It says 2A, Harper confirmed softly, almost reluctantly. Madeline's smile thinned. "Well, mistakes happen. Perhaps someone at the gate printed it wrong. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a dismissal." Alicia looked down at her lap, her thoughts tightening into a coil. She could feel the old ache rising, the urge to shrink, to avoid conflict, to take the easier road of silence. But another voice echoed inside her. "If you give ground every time, you'll never stand at all." She lifted her head, her voice clear, though quiet. "There's no mistake." Her words weren't loud, but they were firm enough to slice through the cabin. Tyler's thumb pressed the record button. The engines outside roared faintly as ground crew prepared for pushback, the cabin lights dimming for departure. But in seat 2A, the flight had already taken off in another way entirely. A confrontation was brewing, one that no one on board would forget. The moment stretched like a rubber band, tight and trembling, ready to snap. Alicia sat poised in seat 2A, her fingers resting lightly on her lap, while Madeline Cross hovered above her like a storm cloud ready to break. Passengers shifted in their seats. Some pretended to look away, as though absorbed in their magazines or phones, but their ears tilted toward the tension. Others stared openly, hungry for drama to break the monotony of pre-flight rituals. Alicia felt the weight of their attention pressing against her skin. She had lived long enough to know how quickly curiosity could tip into judgment. Madeline's voice cut the silence. "Listen, sweetheart. I know how these things happen. Someone probably gave you the wrong boarding pass. Why don't you gather your things and let me sit down? We don't need to make a scene." Her tone was laced with sugar, but beneath it was steel. Alicia lifted her gaze, calm but firm. "I'm not moving. This is my seat." Her words were simple, quiet enough that she didn't need to raise her voice, but the firmness in her tone made the air shift again. Madeline blinked, then let out a laugh, brittle and sharp. "Your seat," she repeated, as if testing the phrase on her tongue. "Honey, this isn't economy. This is first class. Do you understand what that means?" A ripple of discomfort passed through the cabin. The insult was veiled but visible to everyone. Alicia breathed in slowly through her nose. Her chest rose, then fell, steady as the tide. "Yes," she said. "I understand perfectly." Her restraint was both a shield and a weapon. From the corner of his eye, Tyler Brooks zoomed in with his phone camera. He wasn't the type to meddle in strangers' disputes, but something about this moment made his pulse quicken. He knew injustice when he saw it, and he knew a story when it began to unfold. He whispered under his breath, "This is gonna go viral." Chief Purser Harper Lane cleared her throat, clutching her tablet like a lifeline. "Ladies," she said, aiming for professionalism, though her voice trembled with unease. "Let's not escalate. We'll resolve this." "Then resolve it," Madeline snapped. "Tell her to move." Harper hesitated, her gaze flicking from Madeline's piercing stare to Alicia's unwavering calm. In that pause, her decision hung in the balance. Alicia could see it in Harper's eyes, the instinct to side with power, with privilege, with the one who looked like she belonged. It was the same calculation she had faced in boardrooms, at charity galas, in the cold aisles of luxury boutiques. "Mrs. Cross," Harper said carefully, "perhaps we can double-check at the gate." Madeline cut her off. "Do I look like I have time for that? My husband is Senator Charles Cross. We don't wait in lines, and we don't make mistakes about where we sit." The declaration landed heavy in the air, pulling a few gasps from nearby rows. Madeline said it not just to Harper, but to everyone within earshot. It was her way of flashing credentials, like a badge she believed placed her above scrutiny. Alicia's chest tightened, not from fear, but from recognition. She had seen this before the performance of entitlement, the belief that certain last names carved out exceptions in the rules that bound everyone else. Her inner voice stirred, low but steady. "Do not shrink. Do not give her this seat. Do not give her this victory." So she spoke, her voice smooth as silk but unshakable. "Your husband's title doesn't change my boarding pass." It was the kind of line that settled deep, like a pebble thrown into a still pond. The ripples spread across the cabin, into the minds of every silent witness. Tyler grinned behind his phone. That was a quote. Madeline's face flushed red, blotches blooming across her carefully powdered cheeks. "You know," she said, "louder now. There are places for people like you. This isn't one of them." Gasps, sharp and audible, punctured the air. Alicia felt the words hit her chest like a physical blow. They were the same kind of words that had followed her since childhood at school, at job interviews, even at her wedding reception, whispered behind glasses of champagne. People like you. Her jaw clenched. For a moment, she wanted to scream, to stand up, to unleash the rage that lived inside her bones from years of being belittled. But she didn't. She breathed. She sat taller. People like me, Alicia replied softly, have earned the right to sit wherever we belong. The cabin buzzed, a hum of whispers threading between rows. Madeline's hand tightened around the strap of her designer handbag. Her nostrils flared, and her eyes darted around the cabin, searching for validation. But what she found were passengers who suddenly refused to meet her gaze, unwilling to side with her cruelty. Only Harper lingered, fidgeting with her tablet, caught in the undertow of indecision. Tyler whispered again into his phone. "Oh, this is about to blow." The engines rumbled faintly, a signal that departure neared. Yet inside the cabin, time felt frozen, suspended by the weight of words and the threat of escalation. Then Madeline leaned closer, invading Alicia's space, her voice dripping with disdain. "You should thank me for giving you a lesson. This world doesn't hand out respect. You have to look like you deserve it." Alicia's heart pounded. She thought of her grandmother, who had scrubbed floors so Alicia could one day sit in a seat like this. She thought of her mother, who told her never to confuse silence with weakness. She thought of every scar, every bruise, every insult carried by those who came before her. And she thought, respect isn't something you put on like a coat. It's something you live. Her lips parted, ready to speak, but the words caught in her throat as Madeline suddenly raised her voice. "You don't belong here," she shouted. Heads whipped around. The entire cabin was watching now, no longer pretending indifference. Alicia steadied herself, the tremor in her chest hidden behind a mask of composure. "I do," she said, clear and unwavering. That was when Madeline's hand twitched, her palm lifting as if gravity itself had betrayed her restraint. The slap didn't come yet. Not yet. But the air carried the tension of inevitability. And in that suspended heartbeat before impact, Alicia closed her eyes, whispering inwardly, "Not again. Not like this." She braced herself, not for the strike, but for what would follow. Tyler's phone captured everything: the words, the stares, the moment before the storm. He felt the adrenaline of history in the making, though he didn't yet know how far the ripples would spread. Harper Lane swallowed hard, her training faltering as instinct screamed at her to intervene. But she stood frozen, her authority tangled in fear. The passengers leaned forward, breath shallow, eyes wide, and Alicia, steady as stone, prepared to weather what came next. The hum of the engines outside grew louder as the aircraft doors sealed. The final boarding call had been made, and passengers settled into their seats with the familiar shuffle of belts clicking and overhead bins snapping shut. Yet in row 2, tension replaced routine. Alicia Morgan sat still, her shoulders squared, though her chest burned with the weight of every eye upon her. She could feel the energy shift each time Madeline Cross's voice rose, as if the cabin itself leaned toward the confrontation. Harper Lane, the chief purser, tried again, her voice brittle around the edges. "Mrs. Cross, Mrs. Morgan, please, let's remain calm. We'll sort this out quietly." But Madeline had no interest in quiet. "You don't understand," she said, her tone sharpened with every syllable. "This is a matter of principle. People who can't afford to be here shouldn't be handed things they don't deserve." The words cut through the cabin, slicing past the thin fabric of civility. Alicia inhaled, the breath catching on the rawness of the moment. She thought of her years of hard work before marrying Darius, her career as a marketing consultant, the countless nights she had climbed toward success brick by brick. Yet in Madeline's eyes, all of that vanished, erased by the color of her skin and the simplicity of her dress. Her hand pressed against her lap, steadying herself. She spoke, not with anger, but with clarity. I didn't ask for anything to be handed to me. I paid for this seat, just like you paid for yours. Her voice was calm, but its resonance traveled through the rows. Madeline's laughter came like broken glass. Paid for it. Don't be ridiculous. Women like you don't pay for seats like this. You cling to men who do. Gasps fluttered through the cabin. The passengers were no longer detached observers. They were pulled into the storm. Tyler Brooks, phone held low at his chest, captured every second. The lens trembled slightly with his own shock, but his finger never left the record button. His instinct screamed. This was more than an argument. It was history unfolding in real time. From the back row of first class, an older gentleman adjusted his glasses. Arthur Bennett, retired pilot, watched with an expression that mingled disbelief and sorrow. He had flown thousands of hours across oceans and continents, yet he had never seen entitlement dressed so brazenly. Arthur's hands curled into fists on his knees, but he waited. He wanted to see if someone in authority would finally step in. Harper shifted her weight uncomfortably. Mrs. Cross, please, your comments are inappropriate. Let's not inappropriate, Madeline snapped. What's inappropriate is allowing a woman who clearly doesn't belong here to occupy a seat she didn't earn. Do you know how many people like me fund this airline? My husband's connections alone. Enough! Alicia's voice startled even herself. It came sharper than she intended, fueled by the pressure of restraint stretched too thin. She turned her face toward Madeline fully now, no longer looking away. Her eyes were steady, unflinching. I belong here, Alicia said, each word precise, deliberate. Not because of who my husband is, not because of your permission. I belong here because I paid for this seat, because I earned the right to be here, because dignity isn't something you get to decide for me. The cabin vibrated with the force of her words. Even those who had sided with silence felt the sting of truth echoing in their chests. Madeline recoiled, but only for a heartbeat. Then fury overtook her expression. You think you can lecture me, she hissed. You think your little speech makes you equal to me. Her hand trembled against the strap of her bag, anger radiating from her like heat. Arthur Bennett leaned forward, his voice gravelly but firm. Ma'am, that's enough. She has every right to sit where she is. His interjection caught Madeline off guard. Head swiveled toward him, toward the man who had finally broken the wall of silence. Arthur adjusted his glasses, meeting Madeline's glare with the steadiness of a man who had seen too much to be intimidated. I flew planes for 40 years. And I'll tell you what, I never once saw a ticket ask the color of someone's skin before printing a seat number. The rules are the same for all of us. Applause didn't follow, not yet. But the murmurs shifted, the tide of the cabin inching toward Alicia. Madeline's face flushed crimson. Stay out of this. Old man. Arthur didn't flinch. He leaned back in his seat, calm in his defiance. Alicia's heart thudded with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. Gratitude that someone had finally spoken. Sorrow that it took so long. She had fought battles like this all her life, quiet ones, public ones, battles in her head long after the words had ended. How many times do we have to prove ourselves, she thought. How many times do we have to sit here, holding our dignity like armor, while someone tries to strip it away. Her throat tightened. She blinked back, the sting in her eyes. She would not let Madeline see her cry. The silence cracked with Madeline's voice. Louder, harsher. You'll regret this. She spat at Alicia. Do you know who I am? Alicia exhaled through her nose, her voice quiet but piercing. Yes, I know exactly who you are. You're someone who thinks power means respect. But you're wrong. Respect is something you earn. Her words landed like stones, heavy and undeniable. Madeline's chest heaved. Her hand jerked upward as though pulled by a current stronger than reason. And then it happened. The slap rang out, sharp and startling, echoing off the narrow walls of the cabin. The sound silenced everything else, the hum of the engines, the shuffle of passengers, even the shallow breaths of those who watched. Alicia's head tilted slightly with the force, her cheek stinging hot, red blooming across her skin. For a moment, the world froze. Tyler's phone captured it, the screen recording the instant in perfect, damning clarity. He swallowed hard, whispering to himself, "She really did it." Arthur lurched halfway from his seat, outrage flaring in his chest. Harper gasped, a hand flying to her mouth as if she herself had been struck. And Alicia did not cry. She sat upright, her hand slowly rising to touch the burning imprint on her cheek. Her fingers hovered, then pressed lightly against the heat. She lifted her chin, her eyes meeting Madeline's with a calm fiercer than rage. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Passengers waited for her to scream, to shout, to retaliate. But Alicia only breathed, her composure unbroken, her dignity intact. Her silence spoke louder than any words could. Madeline's chest rose and fell rapidly, her own breath ragged from the burst of violence. She looked around, expecting nods of approval, solidarity. Instead, she found only wide eyes and hushed horror. No one clapped. No one agreed. Even Harper's training crumbled, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Cross, what have you done?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Inside Alicia's mind, voices clashed. One urged her to stand, to fight back, to unleash the fury boiling under her calm. Another whispered to remain steady, to let Madeline's actions condemn her more than words ever could. She chose silence, but deep within her, the storm gathered. She thought of Darius, not yet on this plane. She thought of how often she had shielded him from these moments, protecting his world from the ugliness she endured. This time, she promised herself, he would see, the world would see. Her eyes burned not with tears, but with resolve. The slap had not broken her. It had lit the fire. The sound of the slap lingered in the air long after the sting had faded from Alicia's cheek. It was as though the walls of the plane had absorbed it, holding on to the echo, refusing to let anyone forget what had just happened. No one spoke. No one moved. The hum of the engines was steady, the cabin pressurized. But inside row 2, the silence felt suffocating. Alicia sat perfectly still, her posture unbroken, her hands folded carefully in her lap. Her cheek pulsed with heat, but her eyes remained steady, fixed on the woman who had struck her. Madeline Cross breathed heavily, chest rising and falling, her expression flickering between triumph and unease. She seemed to realize too late that what she had done could not be undone. Passengers stared, some in disbelief, some in disgust, some with their phones half hidden but still recording. The thin veil of privacy that first class usually promised had been ripped apart. Tyler Brooks glanced at his screen, confirming he'd captured the moment in flawless clarity. His heart raced, not from excitement now, but from the weight of what this recording meant. Arthur Bennett shook his head slowly, sorrow etched across his face. His voice, gravelly with age, broke the silence. "I've seen many things in my life," he said softly, "but this is shameful." His words rippled across the cabin, pulling quiet nods from those who hadn't yet found the courage to speak. Chief Purser Harper Lane swallowed hard, her palms damp against the tablet she clutched. Protocol screamed at her to intervene, to take control, but fear knotted in her chest. Fear of Madeline's power, her husband's name, the backlash of standing against the entitled. Still, her training tugged at her, demanding action. She crouched slightly toward Alicia, her voice lowered but trembling. "Mrs. Morgan, are you all right?" Alicia didn't answer right away. Her silence was deliberate, steadying. When she did speak, her words were clear. "I am fine." Her tone held no trace of anger, no sign of surrender. It was calm, dignified, the kind of composure that stripped power away from violence. Harper nodded, though unease carved deeper into her features. Madeline's gaze darted around the cabin, searching for allies, but none came. Not a single passenger spoke up in her defense. Even those who had whispered agreement with her earlier stared at their laps now, unwilling to attach themselves to her cruelty. Frustration twisted Madeline's expression. "What none of you will say it. You all know she doesn't belong here. You all thought it the second you saw her sit down." Her voice was louder now, desperate. Arthur's voice cut through again, sharper this time. "What we all saw," he said, "was a woman with a ticket, a rightful seat, and what we just saw was you lay hands on her. That's what we saw." His words drew a quiet murmur of agreement. A few passengers nodded visibly. Madeline's face burned red, but her jaw locked tight. Inside Alicia's chest, her heart pounded like a drum, echoing against her ribs. She sat tall, but within her mind, voices collided. "Stand up. Tell her what she's done. Show them you won't be humiliated. No, don't give her the satisfaction of seeing your rage. Dignity is louder than anger." She closed her eyes briefly, her grandmother's voice echoing. "Strength isn't about how hard you hit back, Alicia. It's about how well you stand when someone tries to break you." Her hands tightened in her lap. She opened her eyes again, calm restored. From the back of the cabin, a voice rose, a woman's voice, young but firm. That was assault. Heads turned toward the speaker. A brunette in her 30s, laptop bag tucked beneath her seat, stared directly at Madeline. "You don't get to put your hands on someone because you don't like who they are." Madeline's lips parted, shock flashing across her face. The pushback was multiplying. "Yes," another voice added, a man near the aisle. "We all saw it. It was unprovoked." For the first time since boarding, Alicia felt something shift. A wave of solidarity, fragile but growing, moved through the cabin. Madeline's expression faltered. Her confidence cracked at the edges. Tyler Brooks kept filming, his whisper urgent. "This is it. People are turning. This changes everything." He zoomed closer on Alicia's face, her calm, her dignity, the redness on her cheek. It all told a story no narration could improve. Harper glanced toward the cockpit. Hesitation etched across her features. She knew she needed to notify the captain, but once she did, the incident would escalate far beyond a passenger quarrel. It would become official. And once official, There would be consequences. Her thumb hovered over the intercom. Alicia felt the shift, too. She didn't bask in it. She wasn't here for applause, but the weight pressing on her chest lightened slightly. She had endured the worst, and still she sat with her dignity unbroken. Her eyes flicked toward Tyler, who quickly lowered his phone, pretending innocence. She knew the moment had been captured, preserved forever. For the first time since Madeline had stopped at her row, Alicia's lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile. Not of victory, but of resolve. The world would see. Madeline finally collapsed into the empty seat beside Alicia, her husband's seat. To be, though she did so with a huff that carried her frustration. She crossed her arms tightly, avoiding Alicia's gaze, but her presence remained like a storm cloud. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, the aftershocks of the slap still humming through the air. Arthur leaned back slowly, but his eyes never left Alicia. His nod was small, but it carried weight. "You did well," it seemed to say. Alicia returned the nod, silent gratitude passing between them. Inside her mind, though, the conflict remained. Should I have shouted? Should I have demanded she be removed? Her thoughts swirled, heavy with doubt. Yet beneath them all ran a steady current. No. Standing tall in silence was stronger than any scream. Her cheek burned, but her spirit did not. From the cockpit, the chime sounded a signal from Harper to the captain. The decision had been made. The confrontation was no longer private. Captain Rhodes would soon know, and once he knew, there would be no turning back. The cabin held its breath, waiting for what came next. The chime that echoed through the cabin was subtle, but to those who recognized it, it was the sound of escalation. Harper Lane's fingers trembled slightly as she released the intercom button, her throat tight with the weight of what she had just done. From the cockpit, footsteps approached, the sound of polished shoes against the narrow floor, a presence moving closer with each step, commanding silence before a word was spoken. Captain Rhodes entered the cabin, tall, broad-shouldered, silver streaks cutting through his dark hair. Captain Daniel Rhodes had the look of a man who had spent decades in command. His uniform was crisp, his cap tucked neatly under one arm. He scanned the cabin with the practiced eye of someone used to turbulence both in the sky and among people. But the air here was different, tense, fragile. "What's going on?" His voice was calm, but it carried authority, the kind that demanded answers. Harper straightened her posture, though sweat clung to her temples. "Captain, there's been an incident between passengers." "Incident," Rhodes repeated, his gaze sweeping the row. His eyes landed first on Alicia, calm and composed, though the redness on her cheek betrayed what had happened. Then on Madeline, rigid in her seat, arms crossed tight like a child caught misbehaving. Finally, his gaze flicked to the surrounding passengers, whose silence told its own story. What kind of incident? Rhodes pressed. Harper hesitated. Her duty warred with her fear. "Physical contact," she said finally, her voice quiet. Rhodes's jaw tightened. "Who initiated it?" No one spoke. The silence of complicity threatened to swallow the truth until Arthur Bennett cleared his throat. "She did," Arthur said, his finger lifting toward Madeline Cross. Struck her across the face for nothing more than sitting in her rightful seat. Gasps stirred again, but this time they weren't from shock. They were from relief. Someone had said it plainly. Rhodes' gaze hardened. He turned to Madeline. "Is that true?" Madeline let out a scoff, tilting her chin high. "You can't take their word for it. These people don't understand." "Answer the question," Rhodes interrupted, his tone cutting. Madeline faltered, her lips parting without sound. Her confidence, so sharp minutes ago, wavered beneath the weight of authority. Alicia sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, her breathing steady. She had no interest in defending herself, not when the truth was already plain, not when her dignity could speak louder than words. Rhodes shifted his stance, turning back toward Harper. Why wasn't I informed immediately? Harper flushed. I was trying to de-escalate, sir. The captain's eyes narrowed. He didn't scold her, but his silence carried its own reprimand. Turning again toward Alicia, his expression softened, just slightly. Ma'am, do you wish to file a formal complaint? Every head turned toward her. The weight of decision pressed against her chest. She could feel Madeline's glare stabbing like needles into her skin. Alicia inhaled, her voice calm. Yes, I do. The word struck like a bell, resonant and undeniable. Madeline bolted upright in her seat. This is absurd. Do you know who I am? My husband. Rhodes lifted a hand, silencing her. What your husband does or doesn't do has no bearing here. On this aircraft, my responsibility is the safety and dignity of every passenger. And what you did was unacceptable. The firmness in his tone carried the weight of command. It shifted the energy of the cabin. For the first time, passengers exhaled, relief threading through the air. Tyler Brooks whispered into his phone. The captain just shuddered down. This is gold. His camera captured the moment. Rhodes standing tall. Madeline shrinking beneath the weight of his authority. But Alicia wasn't celebrating. Her hand still trembled slightly against her lap. Her heart raced with the intensity of everything unfolding. Inside, her thoughts churned. What if they let her stay? What if nothing changes? What if this is just another moment dismissed, another wound buried, and then a quieter thought? But what if this is different? What if this time the world listens? She steadied her breathing, her grandmother's voice echoing once again. Stand firm, Alicia. Even storms pass. Rhodes leaned toward Harper. Escort Mrs. Cross to the galley. She will remain there until I determine our next steps. Harper's eyes widened. Removing a high-profile passenger was no small thing, but Rhodes's tone brooked no argument. Yes, Captain. Harper gestured for Madeline to stand. This way. Ma'am. Madeline's face twisted with fury. I am not going anywhere. You cannot treat me like some criminal. Do you know who now? Rhodes said firmly. The single word carried the force of command honed by decades in the cockpit. Even Madeline flinched. With a huff of outrage, she gathered her bag and stormed toward the galley, her heels clattering against the floor. The cabin exhaled. Arthur leaned slightly toward Alicia, his voice low. You handled yourself with more grace than most could. I admire that. Alicia smiled faintly, her cheek still throbbing. Thank you. Her gratitude was quiet, but her eyes shone with strength. Tyler, still recording, whispered again. This is going to explode online. No way people stay silent after seeing this. But Alicia wasn't thinking about virality. She was thinking about justice. She was thinking about her husband, Darius, and how she would tell him every detail when they landed. And she was thinking about the passengers around her, strangers whose silence had shifted into solidarity. Rhodes stood tall in the aisle, surveying the cabin. We will proceed with departure. But let me be clear, this aircraft will be operated with respect. There will be no further incidents tolerated. Is that understood? Nods rippled through the rows. A murmur of agreement followed. Alicia met his gaze briefly. There was no smile, no triumph in her expression, only quiet resolve. The slap had marked her, but it had not defined her. And as the engines roared to life, she knew this was only the beginning. The aircraft rumbled as it pushed back from the gate, the cabin lights dimming for departure. Yet for the passengers in first class, the usual excitement of takeoff felt muted, blanketed by the heaviness of what had just occurred. Alicia Morgan sat quietly in seat 2A, the red mark on her cheek slowly fading, but still visible under the soft glow of the overhead light. She stared out the window, watching the runway lights blur into lines of white and amber as the plane taxied. Her reflection in the glass was calm, but beneath that calm lived a storm. She thought of the slap sharp, humiliating, unforgettable. The sting on her skin had dulled, but the memory burned deeper. Why did it still feel like my silence wasn't enough, she wondered. Why do I always have to hold the weight of dignity while others spill their cruelty without restraint? Her chest rose with a steady breath. She reminded herself she had not broken. That mattered. Across the aisle, Arthur Bennett leaned back in his seat, his eyes still fixed on her. He admired the woman's strength, her refusal to crumble under public humiliation. In all his years flying, he had seen men lose their tempers over spilled drinks, women shout over delayed meals, executives storm about lost luggage. But Alicia, she had endured violence with grace that silenced an entire cabin. Arthur closed his eyes briefly, shaking his head. Different times, he muttered under his breath. But not different enough. Tyler Brooks sat 3 rows back, phone in his lap. His video was already uploading, the progress bar crawling across the screen. He had hesitated for only a moment before hitting share. Now, the clip, 15 seconds long, beginning with Madeline's cruel words and ending with the sharp crack of her hand against Alicia's face, was making its way into the digital bloodstream. He didn't need to wonder if it would go viral. He knew it would. Tyler glanced at Alicia, her posture still steady despite everything. He whispered to himself, "The world's gonna know who she is." The engines roared, pressing passengers back into their seats as the plane lifted into the night sky. City lights sparkled beneath them, shrinking into constellations of gold and silver as the aircraft climbed higher, higher, into the clouded dark. But inside Alicia's heart, weight pulled heavy, refusing to lift. She leaned her head back against the seat, closing her eyes. Images flashed behind her lids Madeline's glare, the shock in the cabin, the silence that followed the slap, and then, softer, the memory of her husband's voice. "Don't let them define you. Alicia, you carry more strength in your silence than they ever will in their noise." She pressed her lips together. She wished he was here. She wished Darius could see what had unfolded, how she had endured it. But perhaps, she thought, the recording Tyler made would bring the truth to him and to everyone. In the galley, Madeline Cross stood fuming, her arms crossed so tightly it seemed she might snap. Harper hovered nearby, offering polite distance but keeping a watchful eye. Madeline muttered under her breath, pacing in the narrow space. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Do they know who I am? My husband will bury this airline when he hears about it. But beneath her anger, a flicker of fear stirred. She had seen the passengers' faces, the condemnation in their eyes. She had seen Tyler recording. She had felt the shift in the cabin, the solidarity moving against her like an invisible tide. Her chest tightened. What if people believe her? What if this gets out for the first time in years? Madeline felt something she wasn't used to. Vulnerability. Back in her seat, Alicia opened her eyes when she felt Arthur lean slightly toward her. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "You did well," he said. "Better than most could have." Alicia gave him a small nod, her lips curving into a faint smile. "Thank you." Arthur tilted his head. "You've carried yourself with dignity. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." The words soothed her more than she expected. They were the kind of words her father might have spoken, the kind of reassurance that told her she wasn't alone. She let the silence return, closing her eyes again, though her mind kept turning. Meanwhile, Tyler's phone buzzed. Notifications lit the screen, likes, shares, comments stacking up faster than he could read them. "Holy hell! It's already at 10,000 views," he whispered, his pulse quickening. "People are sharing it everywhere." He scrolled through the comments, eyes wide. Who is she? Someone find her name. This woman's Grace. I'm in tears. That slap was disgusting. That senator's wife. She needs to be held accountable. The world outside the plane was waking up to the story, hungry for details. And Tyler knew once they landed, nothing would be the same. Alicia's phone buzzed too, tucked away in her tote bag. She didn't check it, but if she had, she would have seen the first few messages from her husband. "Darius Morgan, I'm hearing something happened on your flight. Are you okay? Call me when you can." Darius's name carried weight in the world of business and politics. A billionaire tech CEO, he had built empires with the calm precision of a strategist, and though he rarely sought the spotlight, his influence was undeniable. He did not yet know the full extent of what had happened in 2A, but soon he would. And when he did, the storm would no longer be confined to this plane. Alicia shifted in her seat, finally reaching for her tote. Her fingers brushed against her phone, but she hesitated. The thought of speaking to Darius right now made her chest tighten. She wasn't ready to relive the slap. Not yet. Instead, she pulled out a small notebook and pen. She had always written when the weight of the world pressed too heavily. Words steadied her, gave shape to her pain. She began scribbling quietly, the pen scratching softly against the page. They think silence means weakness. They think calm means surrender. But silence is power. Calm is strength. And tonight, I will remember who I am, no matter what they try to take from me. She paused, staring at the words. Her throat tightened. Tears threatened, but didn't fall. She shut the notebook gently, sliding it back into her bag. The plane leveled at cruising altitude, the seatbelt light flicking off. Passengers shifted, some rising to stretch, others ordering drinks. The hum of routine returned, though the weight of what had happened still lingered. Alicia remained quiet, her gaze drifting once more to the window. The clouds stretched endlessly beneath them, a white ocean under a dark sky. She pressed her hand lightly to her cheek. The sting had dulled, but the memory had not. Her inner voice whispered again, "You didn't break. You never will." In the galley, Madeline sat stiff, her phone clutched tight. She typed furiously to her husband, "They're humiliating me on this plane. You need to fix this now." Her jaw tightened as she hit send. She believed, as always, that power would save her. But in row 2, Alicia's quiet resolve and Tyler's recording had already shifted the balance. The world beyond the cabin was stirring, watching, judging, and when they landed, the fallout would begin. The plane hummed steadily at 34,000 feet, but inside the cabin, the atmosphere felt restless, like a room full of people waiting for news they couldn't quite put into words. Conversations were hushed, movements cautious. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something bigger than a quarrel between passengers. Alicia Morgan sat still in seat 2A, her gaze fixed on the dark window. She could see her own reflection-calm eyes, steady jaw, the faint mark on her cheek still visible. It wasn't just pain anymore. It was evidence. Across the aisle, Arthur Bennett shifted, his lined face troubled. He had spent decades flying, had seen storms batter metal wings and lightning split the sky. But this storm was different. It wasn't wind or weather. It was humanity itself, clashing at 34,000 feet, 3 rows back. Tyler Brooks glanced at his phone again. The video had exploded. Hundreds of thousands of views now, comments pouring in faster than he could scroll. "Holy," he whispered, cutting himself off when he realized how loud his voice sounded in the tense cabin. He lowered his head, thumbs flying as he read the flood of reactions. Who is she? That black woman is incredible. So much grace. The senator's wife slapped her. Outrageous. She needs to resign. Someone find her husband. I think I know that face. Is that Alicia Morgan? Married to Darius Morgan, Tyler's pulse quickened. The internet was already making connections. Alicia's name was trending, and so was Madeline Cross. In the galley, Madeline gripped her phone like a lifeline. Her fingers flew across the screen, texting her husband Charles with frantic urgency. It's everywhere already. Someone filmed it. Fix this. Fix it now. She stared at the delivered notification, waiting for the comforting buzz of his reply. But seconds dragged into minutes. No answer came. Her chest tightened. For the first time, she imagined the possibility that Charles might not be able to save her from this. Meanwhile, on the ground in New York, Darius Morgan's phone buzzed nonstop as he sat in the quiet lounge of his office tower. He had been in back-to-back meetings all day, preparing for a major tech announcement. But one message had broken through the noise, and it came from his wife. On board. Something happened. I'll explain when I land. And then the second message, this one from a longtime colleague, Darius. You need to see this. It's everywhere. Darius opened the video, his stomach clenching as he watched the grainy 15 seconds that captured everything: the words, the slap, the silence that followed. He felt heat rise behind his eyes, his hand tightening into a fist. He replayed it twice, 3 times. Each time the sting grew sharper. God, he muttered under his breath, standing abruptly from the lounge chair. She went through this alone. But she wasn't alone anymore. Not now. Back on the plane, Alicia finally pulled her phone from her tote, her fingers brushing against the screen. Dozens of notifications blinked across it, messages from friends, colleagues, even reporters she didn't recognize. Her name was already spreading beyond the cabin walls. She opened one message from her husband, the words steady but urgent, I saw. I'm with you. Don't worry. The world will know the truth. Her throat tightened. She closed her eyes briefly, whispering silently to herself, I'm not alone. He sees me. Captain Rhodes walked the aisle quietly, projecting calm authority. He checked in with passengers, his presence reassuring, though tension still lingered. When he reached row 2, he paused, his gaze steady on Alicia. Mrs. Morgan, he said softly, you handled yourself with remarkable composure. I've already filed an incident report to headquarters. The authorities will meet us when we land." Alicia nodded. Her voice was low but unwavering. "Thank you, Captain." His eyes softened just slightly. "I'll ensure you're treated with respect from this moment forward. That's my promise." It wasn't a solution, but it was something. Tyler's phone buzzed again. A notification at the top of the screen. Live, Alicia Morgan slap incident. News outlets were already picking it up. He scrolled quickly, astonished at the speed of it all. "This is wild," he whispered. "It's already national." Arthur leaned toward him, his brows raised. "Son, you should know this isn't just a story. It's a responsibility now. You've shown the world the truth. Make sure you stand by it." Tyler nodded, the weight of the old man's words sinking into his chest. In her seat, Alicia pressed her hand against her cheek again, not to soothe the sting, but to remind herself of what had happened. The slap was no longer just between her and Madeline. It had become a symbol, a wound carried in public. Her thoughts wavered between fear and determination. Fear of what would come when they landed. Fear of being thrust unwillingly into the spotlight, but also determination that this time the humiliation wouldn't be buried. This time, people will see, and they will have to choose which side they're on. In the galley, Madeline finally received a message. Charles's reply was short, sharp, and filled with dread. "Damage control underway. Do not speak to anyone. Keep quiet until we land." Her stomach dropped. He didn't promise protection. He didn't say she was right. He only spoke of damage. For the first time, Madeline wondered if the life she had built on entitlement might collapse around her. She tightened her arms across her chest, muttering under her breath, "No, they can't do this to me. I won't let them." But even as she spoke, doubt gnawed at the edges of her voice. Alicia finally leaned back, her eyes closing as the hum of the engines lulled the cabin into uneasy quiet. For the first time since boarding, she allowed herself a moment of rest. Not peace rest. Her mind drifted to Darius, to his words of support, to the storm she knew he was already preparing to fight. And as she drifted into a light doze, she thought, let them see. Let them all see. On the ground? Darius picked up his phone. His voice calm but lined with steels, he spoke to his assistant. "Call the airline CEO. Tonight. I want answers before her plane touches down." The storm was no longer just in the skies. It was building on the ground. In boardrooms. In headlines. In living rooms across the country. And Alicia Morgan, quiet and dignified, was at the very center of it. By the time the plane crossed into the Midwest sky, the storm outside the cabin was no longer weather, it was everywhere else. Tyler Brooks refreshed his feed for the 10th time in 10 minutes, his mouth hanging open as the numbers climbed. The clip he had uploaded barely 2 hours ago now had over 2.7 million views. Major outlets had picked it up. Hashtags swirled across every platform. Oh, justice for Alicia. Oh, no Seat for hate. Madeline Cross. Passengers who once tried to shrink into anonymity now whispered in disbelief as updates trickled through. They weren't just witnesses anymore. They were participants in a story being told across the nation. Arthur Bennett rubbed his forehead, shaking his head slowly. I lived long enough to see men walk on the moon. But I never thought I'd see something like this turn into a national reckoning before we even land. In row 2, Alicia Morgan sat still, her notebook closed in her lap, her phone buzzing incessantly. She resisted the urge to look at it. She knew what she would find: headlines, commentary, the world dissecting her pain in real time. Her cheek still tingled faintly. The slap had become more than a memory. It was now an image carried on millions of screens. Am I ready for this? She asked herself silently. Do I want this storm to have my name at its center? Her stomach tightened. She hadn't chosen this, but she knew she had a choice now in how to carry it. Meanwhile, in New York, Darius Morgan's office pulsed with tension. His phone call with the airline's CEO had lasted only 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes were enough to send tremors through the company's headquarters. Darius's voice had been measured, never once raised, but it carried the weight of consequence. Your airline let my wife be assaulted in first class. Every second you wait to act is another second of negligence. When she lands, I expect accountability. Immediate, public, transparent, or I will take this further than you can imagine. He ended the call, his jaw tight. His assistant entered with a tablet, headlines already flashing across the screen. CNN just picked it up, the assistant said. So did the Times. The senator's office is refusing to comment. Social media is tearing his wife apart. Darius looked at the headlines, his heart heavy. He didn't want Alicia's pain to be spectacle, but he also knew the more the world saw, the harder it would be for anyone to dismiss her. He whispered to himself, They'll hear you now. Alicia, they'll all hear you. In the galley, Madeline Cross was unraveling. She clutched her phone, scrolling frantically through feeds that had turned hostile. Her face, her name, her slap, it was everywhere. Comment after comment filled the screen. Entitlement at its ugliest. She hit that woman for existing in first class. This is the senator's wife, disgusting. Her breathing grew shallow. No, she muttered. They can't do this to me. Charles will fix it. He has to. But even as she spoke, her husband's latest message appeared. Stay silent. I'm in meetings with party leadership. Damage is severe. Do not make it worse. Madeline's eyes widened. Damage is severe. Not I'll protect you. Not you were right. Only damage. For the first time, fear eclipsed her fury. Captain Rhodes made another pass through the cabin. He didn't check phones, didn't scold passengers for watching the storm unfold. He knew better than to fight it. Some things couldn't be contained, not even at 34,000 feet. When he reached row 2, he paused again at Alicia's seat. Ma'am, he said quietly, law enforcement will be waiting when we land. They've already been notified. Are you prepared for that? Alicia lifted her gaze to meet his. Her eyes were steady, though her chest fluttered with nerves. Yes, I'm prepared. Her words were soft, but they carried conviction. Arthur Bennett leaned closer, nodding slowly. You're stronger than you know, he whispered. She offered him the faintest smile. Tyler's phone buzzed again with a call from a number he didn't recognize. He hesitated, then answered in a whisper. Hello, Mr. Brooks. This is CNN. We've verified your footage. We'd like permission to use it, with attribution. Can you confirm Tyler's pulse spiked? Yeah. Yeah. I confirm. Thank you. You've done a public service. The call ended, leaving Tyler breathless. He leaned back in his seat, staring at Alicia. He realized then what Arthur had meant. This wasn't just a viral clip anymore. It was testimony. And Alicia was no longer just a passenger. She was becoming a symbol. Alicia finally unlocked her phone. Dozens of messages poured in, but one caught her eye. A simple text from Darius. Stand tall. I'm here. Always. Her throat tightened, tears threatening. She blinked them back, her fingers typing a reply. I'm fine. Just tired. I'll need you when we land. The message sent. She exhaled slowly. The thought of stepping into the airport, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions, it made her chest ache. But she also knew she would not be stepping into it alone. Down below, thousands of feet beneath the plane, televisions flickered in homes, airports, offices. News anchors spoke with urgency. Commentators dissected every frame of the clip. Debates began about privilege, about race, about respect, about the dignity owed to every person no matter where they sit. The nation was already arguing, and Alicia's face, calm and unbroken even after the slap, became the image anchoring the debate in the galley. Madeline pressed her palms to her temples, whispering furiously, "They're making me a villain. They don't know the whole story. They don't understand." But even she knew, deep down, there was no whole story that could excuse what the world had seen with their own eyes. The seatbelt sign lit again as the plane began its descent. The intercom crackled to life with Rhodes's steady voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." The routine announcement felt surreal against the backdrop of the storm that awaited them below. Alicia tightened her belt, her palms resting on her lap. She closed her eyes, centering herself. She could hear her grandmother's voice once more. "Storms don't last forever, child, but how you stand in them will be remembered," she whispered inwardly. "Then let them remember." At 34,000 feet, the world had already chosen sides. And as the wheels prepared to touch down, Alicia Morgan was no longer just a passenger in seat 2A. She was stepping into history. The wheels screeched as the plane met the runway, a jolt running through the cabin. Passengers exhaled in unison, some relieved to be back on solid ground, others bracing for the chaos waiting just beyond the glass. Alicia Morgan gripped the armrest lightly, her pulse steady though her stomach fluttered with dread. She glanced at the reflection in the small oval window. Her face looked calm, but her eyes betrayed the truth. They carried exhaustion, fear, and resolve, all woven together. Arthur Bennett leaned closer, his voice low. "Remember, child, the storm may be loud, but it passes. Stand tall." She gave him a faint nod. "Thank you." From his seat, Tyler Brooks could see the swarm outside. Dozens of cameras, their lenses glinting under floodlights. Reporters held microphones like weapons, their mouths already moving as they broadcast live to a nation glued to their screens. He whispered under his breath, "It's insane out there." His phone buzzed with notifications, friends sending screenshots of news channels already running his video on a loop. She was slapped in first class. The billionaire's wife who stood with dignity. The senator's spouse at the center of scandal. It was no longer just a trending story. It was the story. Captain Rhodes' voice came over the intercom. Calm, authoritative. "Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, we will be met by law enforcement and airline representatives upon arrival. Please remain seated until instructed. We appreciate your cooperation." His tone was polite, but passengers understood. This wasn't an ordinary landing. In the galley. Madeline Cross pressed her face into her hands. Her phone buzzed again with another message from Charles Damage, control spiraling. "Do not speak to reporters. Do not leave alone." Her shoulders shook with silent anger and fear. She had never known a world where her last name didn't protect her. Now, for the first time, she felt exposed. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Harper Lane, pale but composed, stood to guide the cabin. "Please remain seated until local authorities board," she instructed, though her voice trembled slightly. Within moments, uniformed officers entered the plane. Their presence was steady, professional. They scanned the cabin quickly before approaching Alicia's row. One officer bent slightly, speaking with respect. "Mrs. Morgan will escort you safely off the aircraft. Your husband is waiting just beyond the gate." Her chest tightened at those words. Darius. Relief washed over her, grounding her amid the chaos. The aisle filled with murmurs as Alicia rose. Some passengers clapped softly, a quiet show of solidarity. Others watched in awe, their phones discreetly raised to capture the moment. Arthur squeezed her hand gently. "You've got this." She gave him a grateful smile, then followed the officers down the narrow aisle. Tyler whispered into his phone as he recorded, "She's walking off now." This is history in the making. As Alicia stepped through the door of the aircraft, the world erupted. The terminal buzzed with flashing cameras, shouted questions, the chaos of too many voices at once. Reporters surged forward. Microphones raised. "Mrs. Morgan, do you want to press charges? Do you blame the airline? Is your husband prepared to respond publicly?" The noise was overwhelming, but Alicia held her composure. Her cheek still burned faintly, but her posture was straight, her gaze calm. Then she saw him. Darius Morgan stood just beyond the cordon of officers, his tailored suit sharp, his presence commanding. His eyes found hers instantly. Relief, fury, and love collided in his expression. She moved toward him, and he reached for her hand, steadying her as though shielding her from the crowd, with nothing more than his presence. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, his voice low enough for only her. She nodded, though tears glimmered in her eyes. "Better now." He squeezed her hand, his jaw tightening as his gaze flicked toward the wall of reporters. Then to the airline executives standing stiffly nearby, their suits immaculate, but their faces strained with unease. "Mr. Morgan," one of them began, forcing a smile. "We're deeply sorry about Darius," cut him off with a look, his voice calm but unyielding. "Save it. You let this happen on your aircraft. My wife was assaulted in first class, and your crew faltered when dignity was on the line. The world saw it. The question is, what will you do about it now?" The executive faltered, his rehearsed words crumbling under the weight of truth. Reporters jostled forward, sensing tension. Microphones pushed closer. "Mr. Morgan, will you be suing the airline? Do you demand the senator's resignation?" Darius lifted his chin, his voice steady and deliberate. "My wife's dignity is not negotiable. This isn't about wealth or politics. It's about respect, something every passenger deserves. If this airline cannot guarantee that, then we have a larger problem than one incident." His words echoed through the terminal, carried by cameras, amplified by the feeds already broadcasting live. A murmur spread through the crowd, not of outrage this time, but of recognition. Behind the cordon, Madeline Cross was escorted out separately, her face pale under the harsh lights. Reporters swarmed her, questions flying like arrows. "Mrs. Cross, why did you slap her? Do you regret it? Did your husband instruct you?" She tried to shield her face with her bag, her voice snapping. No comment, but the cameras caught every flinch, every stumble. The contrast was stark. Alicia stood steady, surrounded by support. Madeline crumbled under the weight of exposure. Alicia leaned into Darius slightly, her voice soft but firm. "I just want this to mean something. Not just for me, for anyone who's ever felt humiliated like that." Darius looked at her, his eyes fierce with determination. "It already does, but we'll make sure it means more." He kissed her temple lightly, then turned back toward the cameras. The officers cleared a path, leading Alicia and Darius through the throng. Reporters shouted, Flashes popped, but neither faltered. Behind them, Captain Rhodes spoke quietly to the airline officials. His words weren't broadcast, but his expression said enough he was disappointed, and he wasn't hiding it. Arthur Bennett lingered at the gate, watching with quiet pride. He whispered to no one in particular. Grace under fire. That's what history remembers. As they moved through the terminal, Alicia felt the enormity of it pressing on her. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't sought to be a symbol. But now, the nation was watching, and somewhere inside her, a quiet strength rose to meet the moment. The press conference room buzzed like a hive. Rows of cameras pointed toward the small stage, red lights blinking as networks across the country prepared to broadcast live. Reporters murmured, flipping through notes, waiting for the couple whose story had already captured the nation. When Alicia and Darius Morgan entered, the room hushed almost instantly. The contrast was striking Alicia, composed in a simple navy dress, her posture upright, her expression calm but resolute. Beside her, Darius in a tailored suit, his presence commanding without a single word. They sat at the table, microphones positioned before them, flashes popping in rapid succession. The moderator leaned in, speaking into his mic. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Mr. and Mrs. Morgan will now make a statement. Questions will follow. Darius adjusted the microphone, his voice deep and steady. Thank you all for being here. My wife, Alicia, endured an incident yesterday that no passenger should ever have to experience. She was physically assaulted, humiliated, and initially unsupported by the very system meant to ensure her dignity and safety. The entire world saw it. And now, we must ask, what does that mean for everyone else who doesn't have a camera watching? The question hung heavy in the air. Reporters scribbled furiously. He turned to Alicia, giving her space. She has her own words to share. Alicia leaned toward the microphone, her hands folded gently in front of her. Her voice was soft, but carried clearly across the room. I sat in a seat that I had every right to occupy, and for that, I was slapped. She paused, her tone, even almost reflective. It wasn't just about a seat. It was about what people believe others deserve, about who is seen as belonging and who is not. Her eyes swept across the rows of faces. I chose not to retaliate, not because I was weak, but because I was strong. Because dignity doesn't require shouting. It requires standing firm, even when others try to strip it away. For a moment, the room was silent. Even the clicking of cameras paused. Arthur Bennett, watching from the back of the room, felt his throat tighten. He had seen countless men and women face storms in his years of flying, but never had he seen grace wielded as power quite like this. Tyler Brooks, seated near the aisle with a press badge hastily granted by a news outlet, recorded every word. He knew this wasn't just news anymore. It was testimony that would echo far beyond tonight. A reporter raised her hand. Mrs. Morgan, do you intend to press charges? Alicia took a measured breath. Yes, because accountability matters, not just for me, but for every person who has ever been told, silently or loudly, that they don't belong where they rightfully stand. Another voice cut in quickly. Mr. Morgan, do you hold the airline responsible? Darius leaned forward. His voice was calm, deliberate. Yes, I do. Not because one passenger acted out of entitlement, but because the system hesitated when dignity was at stake. We can't change what happened yesterday, but we can change what happens tomorrow. And we will. The airline executives, standing at the side of the room, shifted uncomfortably. Their statements would come later. But in this moment, it was clear the Morgans' words carried more weight than any corporate apology could. Madeline Cross's name buzzed across every reporter's lips, though she was not in the room. Questions about her poured forward, but Alicia lifted a hand gently. "This isn't about one woman's failure," she said softly. "It's about the culture that allows that failure to exist. I don't hate her. I don't wish her ruin. I only hope she chooses a different path forward. But make no mistake, her actions were wrong, and the harm is real." The grace in her words disarmed even the harshest critics. It was not revenge that Alicia sought. It was recognition and change. The moderator tried to move things along, but the flood of questions couldn't be stopped. "What does justice look like for you? What message do you want the public to take away?" Alicia's gaze softened as she answered. "Justice is not just about punishment. It's about prevention. It's about creating a world where this doesn't happen again. Not on an airplane, not in a store, not in a school, not in a boardroom. Justice is a culture of respect," Darius added, his tone firm. "We intend to work with the airline, with regulators, and with community leaders to ensure this moment isn't wasted. If my wife had to endure this, then let her strength serve as the beginning of change for millions who can't always be heard." The room erupted with more questions, but the Morgans stood together, signaling the end of their statement. They rose from their seats, flashes exploding once again. Darius's hand rested lightly at Alicia's back, protective yet proud. As they exited, the crowd erupted not with chaos, but with applause. Spontaneous, raw, unplanned. It wasn't just about sympathy. It was about respect. Outside, protesters had already gathered with handmade signs. "Dignity for all. No seat for hate. Justice for Alicia." Alicia paused briefly as she stepped through the doors, her eyes scanning the crowd. For the first time since the slap, she felt something different coursing through her veins. Not just pain, not just fear, hope. She whispered quietly to Darius, "Maybe this storm is the beginning of something brighter." He squeezed her hand. "It will be. I promise." As the couple entered their car, cameras still flashing, Arthur Bennett remained behind in the press room, watching the footage replay on screens. He smiled faintly, his voice low. Grace under fire, the kind that shifts history. Tyler Brooks uploaded one final clip before leaving, captioning it simply, "Her strength was louder than the slap." And across the nation, millions watched, listened, and remembered. Alicia Morgan hadn't chosen to be a symbol, but as the lights dimmed on that long day, she knew one truth with absolute certainty sometimes. Dignity itself is the loudest voice in the room. Life has a way of showing us, often in painful moments, who we are and what we stand for. Alicia Morgan's story is not just about a slap on an airplane. It is about the quiet power of dignity when it's tested in public. For older generations who have seen decades of change, her composure reminds us of something timeless. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is found in the choice to remain calm when the world provokes you. The lesson here is simple, but profound. Respect is not earned through wealth, titles, or force. It is the baseline we owe to every human being. When that respect is denied, our response defines us. Alicia chose grace over anger, justice over revenge, and through her choice, the world began to confront an old wound with new urgency.